Hello everyone and welcome back to your worst nightmare YouTube channel. To help us feel even more connected as a community, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know where in the world you are watching from. If you would like to share some of your horror encounter, do well to email us through the description of this video. Don't forget to smash the like and subscribe button. Thanks. Now, back to today's episode. When I was 17, my family relocated to Charleston, South Carolina. Shortly after, I landed a job as a busboy at a cozy French bistro. On my very first evening, I was bustling around, tidying up tables, when I noticed two men in their late 30s sitting quietly at a corner table. They were dressed casually, but something about them felt off. They were unnervingly still and silent, almost as if they were waiting for something. As I passed by their table, one of the men signaled for me to come over. Hesitant, I approached, thinking he might need a refill or the check. Instead, he motioned for me to lean in closer, so I did, expecting a quiet request. But what he whispered sent a shiver down my spine. Ever had someone carve their initials into your skin? I was caught completely off guard, too stunned to even respond. I tried to laugh it off, but the cold, unblinking stare he gave me froze me in place. His friend remained silent, never once looking in my direction. I forced a smile and walked away, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. I went straight to the kitchen and found the waitress serving their table. When I told her what had happened, she simply shrugged and said, "Yeah, they're weird like that." Her nonchalance didn't help my nerves, but I pushed through the rest of my shift, avoiding their table as much as possible. But as fate would have it, I couldn't avoid them completely. A while later, the same man waved me over again. My stomach turned, but I didn't want to seem rude, especially on my first night. When I leaned in, he spoke again, his voice low and menacing. "Ever been held down by two men while they choke the life out of you?" That was it. I bolted away from their table and straight to my manager, who, to my horror, simply brushed it off as drunk nonsense. I worked until close that night, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in my chest. I was so unnerved that I asked the bartender to walk me to my car afterward, something I'd never had to do before. To this day, I can't walk past that bistro without remembering those dead eyes and those chilling words. Charleston was supposed to be a fresh start, but that night left me with a lasting fear that I've never quite shaken off. Last summer, I worked as a hostess at a quiet little café tucked away in the heart of Portland. Business was usually slow, and I often went hours without seating a single customer. One afternoon, an older man in his late 60s shuffled in and requested a table by the window. I seated him in Marissa's section, one of my friends and a college student like me. Marissa was used to dealing with all kinds of customers, but something about this man made me uneasy. He began by complimenting her smile, then her hair, then her figure. His comments, though seemingly harmless at first, became increasingly inappropriate. "With legs like yours, you must have a line of men waiting," he leered, causing Marissa to laugh nervously and try to keep things professional. But the man didn't stop there. He began making even more unsettling remarks, hinting at his desires in a way that made her skin crawl. When he tried to grab her as she walked away, she had enough. She switched with our coworker, Jake, claiming her shift was over, though she was really hiding in the kitchen, shaking with fear. When Jake took over, the man's demeanor changed instantly. He went from being overly friendly to cold and silent, finishing his meal quickly and leaving without a word. But before he left, he scribbled Marissa's name all over his tip, $5 bills, each one covered in ink. Our manager, seeing how shaken Marissa was, gave her permission to avoid the man if he ever returned. A few days later, he came back and asked for Marissa. She wasn't due for her shift for another hour, so I told him he'd have to sit with someone else. He refused and stubbornly waited at a table in her section, ignoring all offers to be seated elsewhere. Finally, our manager had to ask him to leave, explaining that he couldn't wait for that long. The man left without saying a word. The next day, he called the cafe, asking for Marissa. Recognizing his voice, I pretended not to know who he was and asked for his name. "No," he replied, "just put her on." I immediately got our manager, who took the call. His face turned pale as he listened, and he hung up without saying another word. After that, we told the man that Marissa no longer worked there. He never returned, but the incident left us all on edge. I don't know what his intentions were, but I'm glad he never got the chance to follow through. Marissa eventually transferred to another job, and to this day, we still wonder what that man was planning. At 19, I was waiting tables at a popular diner in downtown Austin. One of my coworkers, Emily, was a bubbly, outgoing girl who seemed to get along with everyone. She wasn't what you'd call conventionally stunning, but she had a charm that drew people in, and it wasn't long before she caught the eye of a regular customer, a guy in his late 20s who came in almost every day. At first, it seemed innocent enough. The guy always asked to sit in Emily's section, and she didn't mind. He tipped well and was polite, though a bit too eager to chat. But soon, his visits became more frequent, and his small talk turned into personal questions, whether she had a boyfriend, what her schedule was like, if she lived nearby. Emily mentioned to me once that the guy had given her his phone number, but she hadn't used it. I laughed it off, telling her to enjoy the attention and the extra tips, but deep down, I could see that it was starting to bother her. Then, things took a darker turn. One night, as we were closing up, Emily noticed a familiar car parked across the street, a blue sedan. The same car that guy drove. We watched as he sat there, engine running, not moving an inch. Emily was scared, and I was too. From that night on, we made sure she never walked to her car alone. A few weeks later, she forgot to ask someone to walk with her. I saw her heading out and decided to follow at a distance, just to be safe. Sure enough, as soon as she pulled out of the lot, the blue sedan followed. I trailed behind them, heart pounding, until Emily texted me that she was taking the long way home to shake him off. When she finally pulled into her driveway, I was right behind her. The sedan passed by, but didn't stop. Emily was in tears, terrified of what might have happened if I hadn't been there. The next day, Emily told our manager everything. He agreed to change her schedule so she wouldn't have to close anymore. The guy stopped coming around after that, and I hope to God he never finds her again. We all learned a valuable lesson that summer, sometimes, a tip isn't worth the trouble.